Montana, winter of 1886. The light was already fading, that bruised hour when the snow swallows everything, color, sound, even breath. Wind howled through the half-broken fence, scattering hay and memory. In the yard of a weather-beaten ranch, a wagon stood crooked, its wheels half buried in ice. A woman was chained to it, like freight, wrists raw against iron. Her name was Lily Hart. 22. Belly round, eyes hollow from hunger, and a silence too long kept. Her brother Caleb stood a few feet away, his voice cracked with cold and liquor as he bargained with a stranger. The man across from him smelled of whiskey and horse sweat. His coat was wolf fur, his smile the kind you never meet twice. "Strong legs," Caleb said, kicking at the snow. "Quiet mostly. Baby'll come clean." He lifted his hand, waiting for the silver of a revolver to trade. The stranger passed it over without a word, and in that second, the wind paused, as if the whole field held its breath. Lily lowered her eyes to her bound hands. The metal burned through the chill. Deep inside, her child stirred. A slow roll first, then a sharp jolt, urgent, insistent, like a heartbeat striking the ribs from within. She gasped, almost folded, her breath fogging the air. "Easy," Caleb muttered, not looking at her. But she knew. It wasn't him the child was answering. She whispered to the ache in her belly, "I hear you." Her voice barely a tremor, lost in the blizzard. The wagon creaked as the stranger climbed up, ready to haul her toward a life she'd never chosen. Chains scraped. Snow cracked under boots. Her knees weakened, but something inside her refused to fold. That pulse again, stronger this time, like a drum beneath ice. Her skin prickled with cold and terror. She turned her head, eyes searching the horizon, seeing nothing but the endless white. Yet something in her body already moved before she decided to. When the wagon jerked forward, she fell with it, twisting her wrists hard enough to split skin. The chain caught on a broken spoke, snagging just enough. The next moment she ran. Barely upright, half blind with wind and blood, she tore through the snow, the chain still clattering from one wrist. Behind her, a shout broke out. "Get her!" Caleb's voice thin and cracked. She didn't look back. The wind was too loud, the sky too close. Trees blurred and pain seared her ribs. She stumbled, but didn't stop. Each breath cut like glass, but there was something beyond pain now. A single stubborn rhythm. Run, breathe, live. The snow deepened, slowing her legs, dragging at her skirt. Branches whipped her face, leaving fine red lines across pale skin. The world turned to sound and motion, the rattle of the chain, the thud of her heart, the muffled gunshot that went nowhere. Her boots were soaked through, her fingers gone to stone. Still she ran, clutching her stomach as if holding the child still inside her. There was no thought, only that push, an ancient will rising through fear. A memory flickered between her heartbeats. Summer back home before all this. Caleb laughing, tossing pebbles into a creek, promising to buy her a ribbon when times got better. She could almost feel that warmth again, and then the picture shattered beneath the crack of a branch. She slipped, fell hard, her cheek in the snow. The world dimmed to gray, but the small life inside her kicked once more, steady and fierce. The sound of men's boots came faint through the wind. She dragged herself forward, fingers clawing through the drift until the land sloped down into the dark edge of the woods. Snow closed behind her like a door. The forest breathed differently, quieter, deeper. Her chain snagged on a root, snapping free with a brittle pop. Blood dotted the ground like seeds. She pressed on, whispering to no one, "Just a little more." The night swallowed her words whole. Somewhere in the distance, a single light flickered, faint and golden through the storm, not close enough to reach, not far enough to forget. She stared at it, unsure if it was real, and felt her knees give. The light wavered once like a lantern caught in breath, and then vanished. The wind rose again, cruel and endless. Her body sank to the snow, trembling. She wrapped her arms around her belly, cradling the last warmth she had. Her lips moved soundlessly. "Hold on," she whispered. "Mama's not done yet." Above, the sky cracked with thunderless light, a flash that made the world silver for one heartbeat. And in that light, the snow behind her moved. A shadow, tall and still, watching. Then the storm swallowed everything again. The storm had eaten the sky. By the time Isaiah Cole set down his axe, the last swing echoed across the clearing. Clean, hollow, final. Snow drifted through the pines, whispering against his coat, gathering in his beard. The kind of silence that followed wasn't peace, but warning. He stood still, breath clouding in front of him, eyes scanning the tree line. Then he heard it. Barely more than a thread of sound. Not the shuffle of deer or the distant groan of ice, but the raw, uneven pull of human breath. He crouched, listening again. There, between gusts, a small, broken sob carried through the dark. His hand moved to the rifle leaning by the stump, but he didn't lift it. Instinct told him this wasn't a threat. It was something else. He walked toward the sound, boots sinking deep, pine needles crackling beneath the snow. The air smelled of iron. When he saw the trail, thin streaks of red winding between trees, he followed, without a word. The forest thickened, swallowing what little light the storm had spared. Isaiah's coat brushed bark. Snow dusted his shoulders like ash. The sound grew weaker, until he thought he'd lost it. Then, through a break in the pines, he saw her. A shape curled at the base of a fallen birch, half buried, half alive. A woman, pale as the snow itself, one wrist still chained, her hand clutched around her belly. The child moved beneath her torn dress, like something pleading to stay. He approached slowly. "You hear me?" His voice was low, roughened by years of disuse. Her eyelids fluttered. She tried to speak, but only air came. Isaiah knelt, brushed the snow from her hair. Beneath the ice, her skin was burning hot. He could feel it through his gloves. Life, fierce and fragile. The chain glinted at her wrist. He tugged once, testing its hold, then reached for the hatchet at his belt. One clean strike, and the shackle split. She gasped, a small, startled sound, and his hand steadied her shoulder. "Don't move," he said. But her body shook anyway. Every breath a tremor. Isaiah looked around. No footprints but his own. Yet something in the distance cracked, like frozen bark. He straightened, scanning the trees. The old habit came back fast. Rid the wind, erase the trail. He gathered pine branches, dragging them behind him to sweep the snow. Each movement was practiced, precise. When he was done, the forest looked untouched. He returned to her side. Her lips were blue, her pulse thin under his thumb. "Can you walk?" he asked. She blinked, not understanding. So he lifted her. She weighed almost nothing, only the child heavy between them. As he carried her through the snow, her head fell against his chest, her breath a warm flutter through his coat. He didn't think of what it meant, only that he couldn't leave her here. Half a mile east, his cabin crouched between the evergreens. Its roof bowed under snow, chimney cold. He kicked the door open, the hinges groaning like an old animal. The smell inside was of pine tar and steel, clean but empty. He laid her on the cot by the stove, pulled off his gloves, and stoked the ashes until the fire caught. Orange light spread slowly, licking the walls, crawling into corners untouched for days. He poured melted snow into a tin cup and brushed the frost from her hair. The girl stirred, murmuring something he couldn't catch. When she opened her eyes, they darted around, confused, afraid. "You're safe here," he said, though his voice carried no promise, just a fact. She tried to speak again, managed only a whisper. "My brother." He stopped her with a shake of his head. "Don't talk." He covered her with an old wool blanket, tucking it tight around her shoulders. The chain still hung from her wrist, short and broken. He cut it loose with a dull file, metal against metal, sparks hissing into the fire. When the last link fell, he didn't speak. He set the piece beside the stove, a small thing cooling in the heat. The fire crackled higher, warming the air. And for the first time that night, her breathing steadied. Isaiah sat across from her, elbows on his knees, watching the flames. The memory rose uninvited. Another winter, another fire. A small hand slipping from his in the smoke. He blinked hard and looked away. Outside, the storm dragged its claws across the roof, but inside, warmth spread, uneasy, alive, dangerous. The woman's hand slid under the blanket, resting on her belly. He caught the movement and looked up. "You got a name?" he asked quietly. Her voice came thin but clear. "Lily." He nodded once, almost to himself. "Then rest, Lily." Her eyes drifted shut. He turned back to the fire, feeding it another log. The flames reached up, gold against iron, bright enough to draw shadows across his face. He hadn't planned to light the stove tonight. He hadn't planned for any of this. Yet here it was, a stranger's life breathing under his roof, a child still fighting to arrive, and a silence that felt less empty than before. Outside, the snow kept falling, muffling the world. Inside, the fire spoke for them both. Then a sound, distant, faint, like boots crushing ice, echoed through the night. Isaiah froze, hand moving toward the rifle by the door. The flame flickered. Somewhere beyond the trees, another pair of footsteps answered. By morning, the wind had tired itself out, leaving behind a sky the color of pewter. Smoke curled thin and steady from the chimney, for the first time in months. Inside, the cabin smelled of pine pitch, wool, and melting snow. Isaiah moved like someone not yet used to another heartbeat in the room. He checked the fire, laid fresh logs, poured water into a kettle. The scrape of metal and wood was the only sound, until Lily stirred. She woke slowly, her eyes adjusting to the dim amber light. For a moment, she looked around as if trying to remember how to belong somewhere. The blanket had slipped. Isaiah crossed the room and fixed it, without a word. "You're safe here," he said, voice low, almost uncertain. She nodded, but didn't answer. Her hands, still trembling, went to her belly, and he saw it move beneath the blanket, a quiet ripple of life. He turned away, busying himself with the stove. "You'll need food." His tone was flat, functional. But when he ladled the stew into a tin bowl, he hesitated. It had been years since he'd shared a meal with anyone. The smell of boiled meat and salt filled the small space, climbing into his chest like memory. He handed her the bowl, and she ate in small, careful bites. "You got far to go?" he asked. "I don't know," she whispered. "I was just running." He nodded once, eyes on the fire. "That's long enough reason." The words hung there, soft and simple, until she looked at him properly, for the first time. The lines on his face weren't cruel, just weathered, creased by sun, scar, and solitude. The kind of face that had known both work and loss. Her gaze fell to the shelf near the stove. There, among a row of tin mugs and folded rags, sat a small wooden frame. No picture inside. Only a single name carved into the wood. Eden. Lily reached toward it, her fingers hovering just shy of touch. Isaiah noticed. His hand stopped mid-motion with the kettle. The air between them shifted, quiet, but heavy. "She was mine," he said finally, the words like gravel. "Fire took her." He didn't look at Lily when he spoke, only at the flame. "House went with her." Lily's throat tightened. She wanted to say she was sorry, but the words seemed small against what she saw in his eyes. So she didn't. Instead, she whispered, "She must have liked the light." Isaiah's jaw moved, then stilled. For a long time, neither spoke. The stove popped, throwing sparks against the grate. When he finally stood, he reached for a folded scrap of paper on the table. His handwriting was square and clumsy, the kind of letters made by someone who'd spent a lifetime carving wood, not ink. He set it beside her bowl. Don't lift heavy. The blue bowl's lighter. Don't burn the stew. She smiled without meaning to. It was the first time her face had softened since the snow. Isaiah caught the smile, but pretended not to. He took his coat from the peg and went outside. The air hit him hard, sharp, clean, almost sweet after the thick heat of the cabin. He stood for a while on the porch, watching the snow settle on the fields. The world was quiet, but not empty anymore. He thought of the fire inside, of the woman asleep beneath his roof, and of the name burned into that frame. For the first time in years, the ache felt like something living. When he came back in, Lily was half asleep again, her hand resting on her stomach, fingers tracing invisible shapes. The chain he'd cut the night before lay beside the stove, dull and harmless now. Isaiah picked it up, studied it under the firelight, then dropped it into the flames. The metal hissed once, then went still. He sat back down, rubbing his hands over his knees. Outside, the last of the storm pressed against the windows, whispering like an old voice trying to be remembered. The sound drew him to the door. He opened it a crack. The forest beyond was white and endless, but through the hush came something else. The faint, deliberate crunch of footsteps in snow. He closed the door softly and looked back at the woman on the cut. The fire's glow reached her face, turning her skin gold, times 700 pounds. And for a heartbeat, the cabin looked like a home again. Then the noise came once more, closer this time. Boots, slow and heavy, moving toward the porch. Isaiah's hand found the rifle by the door. The fire flickered, shadows climbing the walls. He waited, breath shallow, until a knock split the silence. One hard rap against the wood. That wasn't the wind. The knock came again, louder, sharper, echoing through the wood. Lily startled awake. Isaiah raised a finger for silence. The wind outside hissed between the boards, then stilled, as if listening too. He crossed the floor in 3 quiet steps, took down the rifle from the wall, and checked the window slit. Through the warped glass, he saw 3 figures, dark against the snow, steam rising from their horses. "Stay quiet," he whispered. He pointed to the far corner, where a low shelf hid a trapdoor flush with the floor. Lily's eyes widened, but she obeyed. Her legs were unsteady. He caught her by the arm, guiding her to the panel. The child inside her shifted, as if sensing the danger. Isaiah lifted the plank. Underneath was a narrow hollow, lined with old sacks and dirt. "Get in," he said. "Don't make a sound." She hesitated. "Who are they?" "Men who don't knock twice." His tone left no room for question. She lowered herself down, biting back a gasp as her belly pressed tight. He covered the opening with a fur rug, just as the door thundered again. When he opened it, cold crashed through the room. The man in front wore a wide-brimmed hat, slick with frost. "Morning," he drawled, though there was nothing polite in his eyes. We're looking for a girl. Pregnant, white, about this tall. Might have come through here last night. Isaiah leaned on the door frame, unmoved. You see a woman out here? She won't last a night. Maybe she didn't, the man said. He tried to peer past Isaiah's shoulder. Mind if we take a look? I do. A second man shifted uneasily, boots squeaking on ice. We were told she ran this way. Isaiah's grip on the rifle tightened, but he didn't raise it. You were told wrong. His voice was even, the kind of calm that draws blood before bullets. For a long moment, no one moved. The fire crackled behind him, loud as thunder in the silence. Then the first man spat into the snow. If she's here, we'll find out. Ain't worth dying over a stranger. Then best you keep living, Isaiah said. They lingered another beat, then turned back toward the trees, curses fading into the wind. Isaiah watched until the last hoofbeat vanished. Only then did he close the door, sliding the bolt with a heavy scrape. The cabin seemed smaller suddenly, the fire too bright. He crossed the room, lifted the rug, and opened the trap door. Lily's face looked up at him, pale and tight with fear. He reached down a hand to help her out. She was shaking, the effort of stillness having worn her thin. They gone? She whispered. For now. Her knees buckled when she stood. He caught her, steadied her, then wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. You'll need rest. They'll come back. Yes. She looked at him then, truly looked, as if trying to read whether he'd already decided what to do. Why help me? Isaiah's jaw worked, words forming and dying in his throat. Finally he said, because I hate seeing things freeze to death. It was a rough truth, nothing more. She managed a trembling smile that didn't last long. Her fingers brushed her coat, and she frowned. From a torn seam near her pocket, something small rolled into her palm. A river stone, smooth and gray, its edges worn by water. She stared at it as though it burned. Isaiah saw the change in her face. What's that? He asked. My brother, she whispered. He used to give me one when he was sorry. The words cracked apart, half grief, half disbelief. She closed her hand around the stone, clutching it tight to her chest. For the first time since she'd run, tears came. Not loud, but steady, cutting lines through the dirt on her cheeks. Isaiah looked away, giving her space the way a man gives space to a storm. He went to the stove, added another log, though the cabin was already warm. Outside, the snow began again, slower now, fat flakes drifting like ashes. Inside, the smell of burning pine filled the air. Lily sat on the cot, shoulders bent, stone hidden in her hand. You should eat something, Isaiah said, keeping his voice low. She nodded, but didn't move. Her gaze was fixed on the fire. On the way, the light swayed and bent. I used to be afraid of flames, she said softly. Now it's the only thing that feels alive. Isaiah didn't answer. He knew that kind of fear, the kind that changes shape until it looks like need. Outside, the forest creaked under new snow. Somewhere beyond the ridge, the men would be circling, their tracks mixing with the storms. Isaiah glanced toward the window, then at the rifle. He'd fought to be left alone for years. Now the quiet was gone. He moved to the table, began gathering supplies: a coil of rope, the small pouch of salt, a folded map. The fire flickered over his hands, over the faint scar that ran along his wrist like a memory. Behind him, Lily's voice came, soft but certain. "They won't stop." "No," he said, "but neither will I." He looked at the door again, the snow swirling outside like ghosts waiting their turn. Then he turned back to her, his face unreadable in the shifting light. "Tomorrow," he said, "we move before they do." Lily's fingers closed once more around the stone, holding it as if it could still warm. The fire hissed, throwing sparks against the dark window, and for a breath, the whole cabin seemed to hold its heart in its throat. The knock came again, louder, sharper, echoing through the wood. Lily startled awake. Isaiah raised a finger for silence. The wind outside hissed between the boards, then stilled, as if listening too. He crossed the floor in 3 quiet steps, took down the rifle from the wall, and checked the window slit. Through the warped glass, he saw 3 figures, dark against the snow, steam rising from their horses. "Stay quiet," he whispered. He pointed to the far corner, where a low shelf hid a trap door flush with the floor. Lily's eyes widened, but she obeyed. Her legs were unsteady. He caught her by the arm, guiding her to the panel. The child inside her shifted, as if sensing the danger. Isaiah lifted the plank. Underneath was a narrow hollow, lined with old sacks and dirt. "Get in," he said. "Don't make a sound." She hesitated. "Who are they?" "Men who don't knock twice." His tone left no room for question. She lowered herself down, biting back a gasp as her belly pressed tight. He covered the opening with a fur rug, just as the door thundered again. When he opened it, cold crashed through the room. The man in front wore a wide-brimmed hat, slick with frost. "Morning," he drawled, though there was nothing polite in his eyes. "We're looking for a girl, pregnant, white, about this tall. Might have come through here last night." Isaiah leaned on the doorframe, unmoved. "You see a woman out here. She won't last a night." "Maybe she didn't," the man said. He tried to peer past Isaiah's shoulder. "Mind if we take a look?" "I do." A second man shifted uneasily, boots squeaking on ice. "We were told she ran this way." Isaiah's grip on the rifle tightened, but he didn't raise it. "You were told wrong." His voice was even, the kind of calm that draws blood before bullets. For a long moment, no one moved. The fire crackled behind him, loud as thunder in the silence. Then the first man spat into the snow. "If she's here, we'll find out. Ain't worth dying over a stranger." "Then best you keep living," Isaiah said. They lingered another beat, then turned back toward the trees, curses fading into the wind. Isaiah watched until the last hoofbeat vanished. Only then did he close the door, sliding the bolt with a heavy scrape. The cabin seemed smaller suddenly, the fire too bright. He crossed the room, lifted the rug, and opened the trap door. Lily's face looked up at him, pale and tight with fear. He reached down a hand to help her out. She was shaking, the effort of stillness having worn her thin. "They gone?" she whispered. "For now." Her knees buckled when she stood. He caught her, steadied her, then wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. "You'll need rest. They'll come back." "Yes." She looked at him then, truly looked, as if trying to read whether he'd already decided what to do. "Why help me?" Isaiah's jaw worked, words forming and dying in his throat. Finally he said, "Because I hate seeing things freeze to death." It was a rough truth, nothing more. She managed a trembling smile that didn't last long. Her fingers brushed her coat, and she frowned. From a torn seam near her pocket, something small rolled into her palm. A river stone, smooth and gray, its edges worn by water. She stared at it as though it burned. Isaiah saw the change in her face. "What's that?" he asked. "My brother," she whispered. "He used to give me one when he was sorry." The words cracked apart, half grief, half disbelief. She closed her hand around the stone, clutching it tight to her chest. For the first time since she'd run. Tears came, not loud, but steady, cutting lines through the dirt on her cheeks. Isaiah looked away, giving her space the way a man gives space to a storm. He went to the stove, added another log, though the cabin was already warm. Outside, the snow began again, slower now, fat flakes drifting like ashes. Inside, the smell of burning pine filled the air. Lily sat on the cot, shoulders bent, stone hidden in her hand. "You should eat something," Isaiah said, keeping his voice low. She nodded, but didn't move. Her gaze was fixed on the fire, on the way the light swayed and bent. "I used to be afraid of flames," she said softly. "Now it's the only thing that feels alive." Isaiah didn't answer. He knew that kind of fear, the kind that changes shape until it looks like need. Outside, the forest creaked under new snow. Somewhere beyond the ridge, the men would be circling, their tracks mixing with the storms. Isaiah glanced toward the window, then at the rifle. He'd fought to be left alone for years. Now the quiet was gone. He moved to the table, began gathering supplies. A coil of rope, the small pouch of salt, a folded map. The fire flickered over his hands, over the faint scar that ran along his wrist like a memory. Behind him, Lily's voice came, soft but certain. "They won't stop." "No," he said, "but neither will I." He looked at the door again, the snow swirling outside like ghosts waiting their turn. Then he turned back to her, his face unreadable in the shifting light. "Tomorrow," he said, "we move before they do." Lily's fingers closed once more around the stone, holding it as if it could still warm. The fire hissed, throwing sparks against the dark window, and for a breath, the whole cabin seemed to hold its heart in its throat. The morning came brittle and bright. Frost shone on the fence posts like small mirrors, and the air bit harder than it had in days. Isaiah was already outside when the first streak of light touched the pines. He tightened the saddle on Midnight, his black mare, breath fogging in the cold. The horse stamped once, restless but patient. From the cabin came the slow creak of the door. Lily, wrapped in his spare coat, one hand pressed to her belly. "You sure we have to go now?" Her voice still rough from sleep. He didn't look up. "Before the next snow, before they circle back." Her eyes followed the faint plume of smoke curling from the chimney, that thin line between warmth and wilderness. "You built this place," she said quietly. "Feels wrong to leave it behind." "It's just wood," he replied. "What's worth keeping can walk." He checked the straps again, then turned to her. "Climb in." She hesitated. "I can walk." "Not fast enough," he said. His tone was gentle, not arguing, just truth. He helped her onto the wagon lined with straw, tucking furs around her legs. She rested back, the child shifting inside as if sensing movement to come. The first wheel broke loose from the rut with a groan. The world outside the clearing waited, white, wide, unwelcoming. Isaiah led Midnight forward, boots crunching through the crusted snow. Behind them the cabin stood small against the pale horizon, smoke thinning into the wind. He didn't look back. The road, if it could be called that, wound through pine and drift. Branches snapped under the wagon's weight. The sky was a washed-out gray, the kind that hides storms in its belly. Lily watched the trees pass, her breath frosting the canvas flap. "Where are we going?" "Willow Bend," he said. "Old woman there knows herbs, knows how to keep things breathing." "You trust her?" "She once saved me when I didn't." The answer hung there, quiet and strange. She wanted to ask what he meant, but the sound of the wagon, wood, wind, hooves, made conversation feel like intrusion. She lay back, hand on her stomach, listening to that rhythm. Each jolt pressed the baby closer against her ribs. Hours stretched thin. Once they stopped by a half-frozen stream. Isaiah broke the ice, filled a canteen, and offered it to her. When she reached for it, her hand trembled. He steadied it with his own. Their fingers brushed, rough against fragile. "Drink," he said simply. She did, the water sharp and alive on her tongue. As they rode, the forest began to thin. Low hills rose ahead, washed in silver light. Somewhere behind them, faint as memory, a crow called. Isaiah glanced back once, eyes narrowing. Nothing moved except the wind, but his hand stayed near the rifle at his hip. Lily caught the gesture. "They're still coming, aren't they?" He nodded slightly. "Maybe, but we'll keep ahead of their hunger." "You always this calm?" "Anger burns too fast," he said. "Fire's meant to last the night." The mare's breath came steady, clouds blooming from her nostrils. Isaiah murmured to her, low and kind, "Easy, girl." The words floated back to Lily, and something in the tone, a patience that sounded like promise, made her chest ache. She closed her eyes and let the rhythm of hooves carry her half into sleep. Sometime near dusk, the sound of water reached them. The river, wide and sluggish beneath a crust of ice. Isaiah slowed the wagon at the edge. The surface looked solid, white stretched thin over dark. He tested it with a boot, listening for the creak. The ice groaned, but held. "Hold tight," he said. Midnight stepped forward, hooves careful. The wagon followed, wheels crackling over frozen glass. Halfway across, the ice gave a long, hollow moan. Lily's hand flew to her mouth. Isaiah didn't stop. "Don't look down," he said. Each step felt like a prayer whispered to indifferent gods. The river beneath them shifted, black water glinting through cracks. Then, silence. They were over. On the far bank, Isaiah exhaled slow. "We're close now," he said, though his eyes stayed fixed on the horizon. The land beyond rose into low hills, and faint against the dimming sky, a thin line of smoke twisted upward. Lily followed his gaze. "Is that it?" He nodded once. Willow Bend. The last light faded as they approached. The wind softened, carrying the smell of ash and herbs. For the first time all day, Lily's shoulders eased. She whispered something. A name, maybe, or a prayer. Isaiah didn't ask. The wagon creaked, wheels sinking into softer ground. Behind them the forest lay still, the river already icing over their tracks. He glanced back once more, not for fear, but for farewell. The cabin they'd left was miles behind, and yet he could almost see it. The door half open, the fire he'd left burning low. It would die by morning, he knew, but somewhere ahead, another would be lit. The horse snorted, the air heavy with coming night. Isaiah tightened his grip on the reins, his breath steady, his voice low. "Almost home," he said, to the mare, to the woman, maybe even to himself. Far beyond the trees, a single chimney sent a thin curl of smoke into the darkening sky, and the first star blinked weakly through the clouds. It looked less like an ending, and more like a sign. One more small flame, refusing to go out. By the time they reached the valley, the sky had fallen into a dull, pewter gray. The wind no longer bit. It hummed low, as if tired of chasing them. A thin trail led toward the river bend, where smoke rose from a stone chimney half hidden under vines. Isaiah slowed the mare, his breath turning white. "We're here," he said quietly. Lily stirred under the furs. Her skin was pale, damp with sweat, her eyes glassy. The ride had drawn the strength from her limbs. "Who lives here?" she asked. "Old May Rivers," he said. "Knows more about life and death than either of us." He helped her down, one arm steadying her weight. The door opened before they could knock. A small woman stood there, wrapped in shawls the color of mud and smoke. Her hair was silver, her gaze sharp as the edge of a knife. She looked them over once, eyes flicking from Isaiah's boots to Lily's belly. "You brought the storm with you," she said. Isaiah dipped his head. And the fire I need to keep lit. Old May studied him for a long moment before stepping aside. Then get her in. The river's watching. Inside, the cottage smelled of sage and resin. Dried herbs hung from the rafters, their shadows dancing in the firelight. May led Lily to a low cot near the hearth, her movements brisk but gentle. Sit, don't talk. She pressed her hands against Lily's belly, eyes half closed, listening not with her ears, but something older. She's close, May said finally. Weeks, maybe days, but the child's strong. Isaiah exhaled, tension easing from his shoulders. You'll help her. May snorted softly. You think I'd let death through my door without a fight? She turned to him, motioning toward the kettle. Snow water there. Boil it. Clean that knife, too. You've used it for wood, not for people. Isaiah obeyed without question. The rhythm of her orders filled the room, grounding the air. Lily watched them move, May's sharp certainty, Isaiah's quiet precision. It was the first time in months she had seen two people act not out of cruelty or greed, but care. The fire crackled, painting the walls in amber. May wrapped Lily in a quilt that smelled faintly of mint and smoke. You've run far, she said, voice softening. But running ends here. What you carry wants a place to land. Lily's throat tightened. I don't know if I can give her one. Child, May said, homes aren't built with boards. They're built with hands that stay. Isaiah looked up from the fire, eyes shadowed. For a heartbeat, the room went still. 3 lives caught in the same breath. Then the kettle whistled, shattering the silence. May moved to tend it. On the shelf above the hearth, Lily noticed something glinting. A folded cloth, old but clean, embroidered with a single letter, E. She reached for it instinctively, fingertips brushing the edge. May turned, caught the motion, and her expression changed. You recognize that? Lily asked. May's gaze shifted to Isaiah, unreadable. Belonged to a child I once delivered, years back. Name was Eden. Isaiah froze. His hands, mid-motion, stilled above the fire. The name cracked the air open like thunder under ice. Lily looked between them, confusion mixing with understanding. May placed the cloth into Lily's hand. She didn't come from nowhere, May said softly. Some names don't die. They circle back until they're seen. Isaiah's jaw worked, but no words came. He turned to the window instead, watching the snow slide from the roof. Outside, the river ran black beneath its crust of ice, whispering to itself. May placed a hand on Lily's shoulder. Rest. The road's not done with you yet. Then she looked to Isaiah, voice low. And you. Stop carrying ghosts like they owe you something. The living need your hands now. He nodded once, the gesture small but heavy. For a while none of them spoke. The fire hummed in the stove, a low and steady sound that seemed to stitch the silence back together. Lily traced the letter on the embroidered cloth. The thread shimmered in the light, simple, worn, but impossibly precise. She wondered what it meant to Isaiah, what it had cost him to hear that name aloud again. When she looked up, he was watching her, not with pain this time, but something quieter, something almost like peace. The storm outside had weakened, its roar now only a murmur. Yet beyond that calm, the forest held its breath in an unfamiliar way. The mare in the shed snorted once, uneasy. Isaiah noticed, hand tightening around the rifle, leaning near the door. "Someone's coming?" Lily asked, voice barely a whisper. He shook his head slowly. "Not yet," he said, though his eyes didn't leave the window. "But they will." May added another log to the fire. The light flared bright, catching the gold in her hair. "Then let them find only smoke," she murmured, "and a story they can't end." The river outside groaned as a sheet of ice cracked and drifted downstream, the sound echoing like distant footsteps. Isaiah glanced toward it once more, then at Lily, still holding the embroidered cloth close to her chest. He didn't say it out loud, but the thought passed through him clear as breath. Eden never truly left this fire. By midday, the storm had thinned to a whisper. The world outside old May's cottage glowed faintly under a gray sun, and the river hummed low behind its thin shell of ice. Isaiah stood near the porch, splitting kindling while smoke from the chimney braided upward. Each swing of the axe felt measured, deliberate, less for warmth than to remind himself he was still here, still capable of building, rather than breaking. The road to the nearby town, Willow Ford, stretched west like a pale scar through the hills. May had told him they'd need supplies, linen, herbs, flour, salt, and a few words with the townsfolk if they hoped to move safely. He hadn't stepped inside that town for 2 winters, not since the fire. Lily stood at the doorway, wrapped in a shawl, her hands resting on the curve of her belly. "You don't like being seen," she said. Isaiah's jaw tightened. "People remember too much." "Or not enough," she murmured. They left just after noon, riding slow. Midnight's hooves thudded soft against packed snow. The air smelled of wood smoke and yeast as they neared Willow Ford. A quiet sprawl of weathered buildings crouched along the road like old men waiting for spring. Smoke curled from chimneys. The sound of hammer against anvil rang from the smithy. Children's laughter floated near the frozen well. As they passed, heads turned, conversations dimmed. Some eyes were wary, others curious. A few offered brief nods, small gestures of acknowledgement in a place where kindness was rationed. Isaiah kept his gaze steady ahead, not defensive, not yielding. Lily felt the weight of those looks pressing against her, like the cold itself. They stopped at the mercantile. The bell above the door jangled weakly. Inside, the air was thick with flour dust and oil. Isaiah gathered what they needed while Lily waited near the counter. The shopkeeper, an old man with tobacco-stained fingers, studied her belly and frowned. "Long ride for a woman that far along," he said. "Not far enough yet," she replied, her tone soft but firm. The man blinked, then nodded once, almost embarrassed by his own curiosity. Time 9 hums. When Isaiah paid, the shopkeeper hesitated before handing him the change. "Good to see you back, Cole," he said quietly. "Didn't think we'd see you again." Isaiah met his gaze, unreadable. "Didn't plan to be seen." Then he turned, pushing the door open. Outside, a thin snow began to fall, lazy flakes twisting through the air. They walked past the churchyard, past the fields where oxen stood motionless under the weight of frost. A woman from the bakery called out softly, holding up a loaf of bread wrapped in paper. "For her," she said, nodding toward Lily. Isaiah hesitated. Before he could refuse, Lily smiled and reached out. "Thank you." That moment, simple, human, shifted something invisible. The baker smiled back. Two children peered from behind her skirts, eyes wide and shining. Isaiah saw it. That tiny crack in the wall between him and the world, and didn't know whether to be comforted or afraid. As they turned back toward the trail, a man from the edge of the square called out, "Lumberjacks lighting a fire again?" His tone wasn't mocking, just surprised. Isaiah didn't stop walking. "Maybe this time it'll stay lit," he said. The words hung there even after they left town. The air carried the smell of bread and smoke as the trail wound back toward May's cottage. On the way, they passed a small wooden sign stuck in the snow. Carved crudely across it were the words, "Festival of Fire, 3 nights hence." Lily touched the edge of the board. "Festival?" Isaiah nodded. "They light a big fire at the square. Say your truth before it burns down. What you want left behind. What you want to keep." "Will you go?" she asked. He gave a dry half-smile. "Never found much to say worth burning for." Back at May's, the fire was still strong. She greeted them with a look that said she already knew every word spoken in town. Lily handed her the loaf, the herbs, the salt. May sniffed once, approving. "Town talk?" she asked. Isaiah shook his head. "Nothing worth echoing." May glanced at Lily. "You look brighter," she said. "I saw faces," Lily replied softly. "And they didn't turn away." May smiled faintly. "That's more healing than anything I've got in those jars." Isaiah stood by the window, looking out toward the ridge. Beyond the dark pines, snow had begun to rise again in thin spirals. He couldn't tell if it was just wind or riders moving slow to stay hidden. He didn't say it aloud, but May saw his eyes. "They'll come back," she said quietly. "I know." "Then we'll be ready," she replied. "Fire's patient when it's fed right." Night settled with the weight of wool. Lily sat near the hearth, sewing the torn edge of her coat. Isaiah cleaned the rifle, each motion careful, quiet. The cottage creaked softly, its timbers shifting like a sleeper's breath. Outside, somewhere beyond the edge of the lamplight, 3 dark shapes paused at the tree line. Their horses snorted, restless. One man spat into the snow. The sound carried faint but clear to the porch. Inside, Isaiah's head lifted. His hand froze mid-motion. He set the rifle down slow, eyes narrowing toward the door. Lily's needle stopped mid-air. May didn't turn from the stove, but her voice cut the air steady as iron. "Don't open it," she said. "Not yet." The wind pressed hard against the window, rattling the glass like a warning. The night came down thick and blue, wrapping the valley in a quiet that felt wrong. The fire in May's hearth crackled low, painting her walls with restless light. Isaiah sat near the window, rifle across his knees, listening. Each gust of wind rattled the shutters, like old bones. The mare in the shed let out a soft, nervous whinny, hooves shifting on straw. "They're close," Isaiah said. His voice was calm, but it carried that thin edge a man gets when his past catches up. May didn't look up from the herbs she was grinding. "Then let them find no door open," she said. Her tone was almost casual, as if danger were just another visitor. She reached for a jar, poured something sharp and bitter-smelling into the fire. The flames flared green, then settled again. Lily sat by the hearth, both hands pressed against her belly. The child had been restless all evening, rolling and pushing, as if it too felt the tremor of the air. She tried to steady her breathing. "Will they hurt us?" Isaiah's eyes flicked toward her. "Not if I stand first." May's head tilted. "You don't win against men like them by standing," she said. "You win by not moving." The first hoofbeat broke the stillness, slow, deliberate, echoing across the frozen yard. Then another, and another. The sound drew closer until it stopped just beyond the porch. Isaiah rose, smooth and silent, and went to the door. Outside, the moon broke through a slit of cloud, casting silver over the snow. 3 riders sat waiting. Their horses shifted, breath steaming. The man in front dismounted, broad shoulders, the kind of arrogance that rides ahead of its own shadow. Harlan Pike. "Evening, Cole," he called, voice muffled under a scarf. "Heard you took in a girl that don't belong to you." Isaiah stepped onto the porch, rifle held low but ready. The wind lifted his coat, carrying the smell of pine and smoke between them. "You came all this way for gossip?" he said. Harlan's mouth twisted into a half-smile. "Not gossip. Business. She's property." "She's breathing," Isaiah replied. "That's all that matters here." For a moment, no one moved. Then the second man shifted in his saddle, muttering, "We don't need this, Harlan." But Harlan ignored him, taking a step forward. "You think that rifle makes you untouchable? You always had a hero streak, Cole. Didn't end well last time, did it?" The words landed like stones, stirring something deep in Isaiah's chest. But he didn't rise to it. He just stared, steady, the way a tree stares downwind. May opened the door behind him, her voice slicing through the cold. "You smell that, boys? That's the scent of wolves close by. They're hungry this year." Harlan turned, startled by her tone. The old woman stepped into the moonlight, her eyes sharp as steel. "You think you own what bleeds?" she said. "You'll learn different if you stay another minute." The men hesitated. The third rider, younger, swallowed hard. Harlan, maybe, but Isaiah had already stepped forward, just enough that the barrel of the rifle caught the moon. He didn't aim it. He didn't have to. His voice was quiet, certain. She's not leaving this place. You want her. You come through me. For a heartbeat, the only sound was the wind pushing at their coats. Harlan's eyes met Isaiah's, saw something there that didn't bluff. He spat once into the snow, turned, and swung into the saddle. You'll regret this, Cole. Maybe, Isaiah said, but not tonight. The riders turned back toward the trees, their shapes swallowed by the dark. Snow began to fall again, slow, deliberate, erasing their tracks almost as soon as they left them. Isaiah stayed on the porch long after they were gone. The rifle hung loose at his side. His breath came in quiet, even clouds. The wind had changed, colder, sharper, but carrying the faint scent of thaw, of something about to break. Inside, Lily's cry pulled him back. She was bent over, knuckles white against the chair. May was already beside her, steady hands guiding her down. It's starting, May said, her voice neither frightened nor surprised. The storm outside's done. The one inside her's begun. Isaiah dropped the rifle and crossed to her. Tell me what to do. May's eyes flicked to his, steady as stone. You've kept her alive this long. Do it again. Sit by her. Stay. Lily gasped, the pain hitting like lightning through her spine. Her fingers clutched the blanket, searching for something to hold on to. Isaiah knelt beside her, offering his hand. She gripped it, hard enough to draw blood. Breathe, he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. I'm here. The storm outside howled once, one last furious breath, then quieted. The fire in the hearth flared, shadows dancing wild on the walls. Lily's head fell back, sweat gleamed on her temples. Isaiah's voice came again, soft but certain, an old sound, a forgotten song. He didn't know he was singing until May looked up and stilled. The lullaby was rough, cracked with years, but its rhythm matched the rise and fall of Lily's breath. She clung to the sound, her body easing between waves of pain. Isaiah didn't stop. The melody filled the cottage, threading through the walls, winding around the fire. May whispered, half to herself, "So the dead finally speak." Outside, snow fell thick again, but gently this time, soft enough to bury the last footprints, without erasing what had been done. The night stretched long and breathless. Rain of ice tapped against the windows, and the river outside roared like a heartbeat breaking its banks. Inside, the air was thick with heat and salt, and the smell of fear turning into strength. Lily's cries came and went like the wind, wild, human, alive. Isaiah knelt beside her, sleeves rolled up, hands trembling though his voice stayed steady. May worked with fierce calm, her hands sure, her eyes bright as flint. "Breathe with her," she said, "not for her." Isaiah nodded, though he barely understood. He brushed the wet hair from Lily's forehead. "You're all right," he whispered. "You hear me? You're all right." Lily's eyes met his, wide, desperate, blazing with something older than pain. "It hurts," she gasped. "I know," he said. "Let it hurt. You're still here." Each contraction hit like thunder through her body. The firelight flickered across their faces. Gold, red, then gold again. Isaiah's arm ached from her grip, but he didn't move. The memory of another small hand, smoke-stained and slipping away, burned behind his eyes. He blinked once, hard, and stayed. May's voice cut through the storm. "Now, girl, the child's ready. Push." The room filled with sound, Lily's breath, the groan of the old beams, the crackle of the fire swelling high as if it wanted to see. The storm outside beat at the walls, but inside something else was breaking open. One final cry tore through her throat, fierce and trembling. And then, silence. A single heartbeat of stillness before the air split again with a sharp, clear wail. May lifted the child, slick and perfect, into the light. "She's here," the old woman said softly, "and she's strong." The baby's cry filled every corner of the house, every empty place Isaiah thought would never be filled again. Lily sagged back, tears and sweat mingling on her cheeks. "Let me see her." May placed the child against her chest. The baby's skin glowed in the firelight, tiny fingers curling against her. Mother's heartbeat. Isaiah watched, frozen. His breath came shallow, his palms still stained with blood and ash. He didn't know what to do with his hands now that they weren't holding her pain. Lily looked up at him. Her voice was barely a whisper, but it cut through the crackle of the fire. "She was born because you kept the fire alive," she said. "Because you stayed when no one else did." Isaiah's throat tightened. He tried to speak, but couldn't. Instead, he reached out. Lily took his hand and placed it on the baby's back. The warmth there was startling, a fragile heartbeat thudding against his palm. He swallowed hard, blinking through the blur in his eyes. "Easy," he whispered, the same word he'd said to Midnight crossing the river, the same tone, the same promise. May smiled faintly from the hearth, her face softer now. "There," she said. "The storm's done." She turned back to the fire, her voice dropping to a murmur. "Every new life burns a name into the world. What will you call her?" Lily glanced at Isaiah, then down at the baby. The child had gone quiet, her breathing slow and certain. "We'll know when she tells us," Lily said. Outside, the rain had eased into a mist. The sound of the river softened, more lullaby than warning. Isaiah stood, his legs unsteady. He moved to the workbench and ran a hand over the rough pine board leaning against it. He began to carve, slow, careful strokes of his knife, the sound blending with the baby's small breaths. When he finished, he sanded the edges smooth with his palm and set the board aside. On its face was a single word, carved deep and simple: home. The old cradle in the corner creaked softly as he placed the new board across its side. It was heavier than the old one, built to last through winters, through time. He set it near the fire. Lily looked over, her lips parting in quiet awe. "You made that tonight?" she asked. He nodded. "Had to." She smiled, exhaustion giving her voice a gentleness that felt like light. "Then maybe this is where we stop running." Isaiah didn't answer. He only looked at the baby, at the fire, at the word carved into wood. Home. It didn't sound like a place anymore. It sounded like a vow. The wind outside shifted, softer now, brushing snow from the eaves. May hummed under her breath as she cleaned the basin, the tune older than memory. Lily drifted into sleep, the child tucked close. Isaiah stayed awake beside the cradle, the fire painting his face in amber. When dawn finally touched the window, he stepped outside. The world was white again, but gentle this time. Smoke rose from the chimney, thin and sure. He closed his eyes, breathing deep, feeling the warmth from inside reach him even through the cold. For the first time in years, he wasn't waiting for something to end. Behind him, inside the cabin, a newborn's cry broke the quiet, not of fear, but of arrival. Isaiah smiled faintly, and his voice, rough, cracked, but steady, answered back through the open door. "I'm right here." Morning came golden and wide, the kind of light that didn't just touch things, but settled inside them. The storm had left behind a clean silence, ice sparkling on the fence rails, steam lifting from the thawing earth. Isaiah stood outside, sanding the final curve of the cradle. His hands were calloused and nicked, the scent of pine clinging to his shirt. Beside the carved word, home, he had etched a small line of wildflowers curling along the edge, the kind that grew by the river where May's herbs took root. From the doorway, Lily watched him. The baby slept against her shoulder, wrapped in May's old shawl. "You didn't sleep," she said softly. Isaiah smiled, faint but real. "Didn't want to." "She looks like she belongs there," Lily whispered, gazing at the cradle. He nodded. "She does. Maybe we all do." By mid-morning, word from town reached them. The Festival of Fire was that afternoon. Folks from Willow Ford would gather by the square, burning away the old year, naming what they meant to keep. May set down her spoon and eyed them both. "You ought to go," she said. Isaiah hesitated. Never had much use for festivals. "Then make use of this one," May replied. "A name needs a fire before it stays." They went together, May walking slow with her cane, Isaiah leading midnight, Lily holding the child close. The road to town shimmered under melting frost, turning the snow into thin rivers of light. As they neared Willow Ford, music drifted toward them. Fiddles, laughter, the murmur of voices rising around a great bonfire built high from oak and cedar. People turned when they arrived. A few faces Isaiah recognized: the blacksmith, the baker, a ranch hand who'd once traded him horseshoes. There were nods, some surprised smiles. No one looked away this time. They stood near the outer ring of the crowd. The fire leapt high, heat pressing against their cheeks. Townsfolk stepped forward one by one, tossing into the flames tokens of the past, broken tools, scraps of old letters, rings, ribbons, all swallowed by gold. When the mayor called for anyone else to speak, silence rippled outward. Time 700. Then Lily stepped forward. Isaiah's breath caught. She turned to him briefly, her eyes calm. "You built a house with your hands," she said softly. "Let me build it, with my voice." He gave a small nod. Lily stepped toward the fire, the baby resting against her heart. The wind shifted, carrying her words so even the farthest corners of the crowd could hear. "My name is Lily Hart," she began. "Once I was sold by my own blood. I was bound, chained, made small. But I ran, not because I was brave, but because the life inside me refused to be sold too." A murmur moved through the crowd. Lily's voice didn't tremble. It carried quiet strength, like the hum of a river under ice. "I was found by a man who spoke little and promised nothing. He didn't tell me I was safe. He just made it true." She looked back toward Isaiah, who stood at the edge of the circle, his face unreadable, but his eyes shining. He built fires when the world froze. He carved a cradle out of the same wood that once buried his grief. He gave us warmth, not with words, but with presence. The firelight licked across her face. "I have no past worth burning tonight," she said, "but I offer what we've built, a home made of patience and a name carved in wood. That's what I'll keep." A hush fell. Then someone began to clap, slow at first. Then others joined, until the sound rolled across the square like thunder softened by joy. Isaiah stepped forward, carrying the small cradle. He placed it near the fire, the carved word "home" glowing orange under the flames. The baby stirred, not from fear, but from light. The mayor smiled, his eyes moist. "Guess the fire's got a new keeper this year," he said. The celebration carried into dusk. Bread passed from hand to hand. Laughter tangled with music. May sat with the baby in her lap, humming low while children gathered around, staring at the tiny bundle as if seeing a miracle they didn't know how to name. Isaiah stood off to the side, quiet, watching the faces around the fire. Willow Ford no longer looked like a place that had turned its back on him. It looked like somewhere that might remember him kindly. As the crowd thinned, a man on horseback rode up from the southern road. Dust clung to his coat, though the ground was wet. He dismounted, spoke briefly with one of the elders, then turned his eyes toward Isaiah. The old man nodded to May. "Ryder says he saw someone by the edge of the pines. Looked like a drifter, carrying a sack of stones." May's face hardened slightly, but her tone stayed even. "Then the past is trying one last time to speak." Lily glanced toward the dark ridge beyond the field. The firelight caught in her eyes, but her voice stayed soft. "If he's coming, let him come. The doors closed, but not locked. Isaiah's jaw set, his gaze on the horizon where the sky faded from red to iron gray. He felt no anger, only a deep, weary knowing. Some things have to return before they can leave for good. When the last flames of the bonfire flickered low, he gathered the cradle and turned toward home. The word carved in pine glowed faintly in the starlight. Behind them, laughter still rippled through the town. But from the trees came another sound, a slow tread, cautious, carrying the weight of miles. May touched his arm. "Storm's not over," she said quietly. Isaiah looked ahead toward the lanterns swinging on the road. "Then we'll keep the fire lit." Behind them, at the edge of the woods, a solitary figure stood half hidden among the birches, breath rising in white clouds, watching, not daring to step forward. The thaw came gentle, soft as breath. Snow slipped from the birches in slow sighs, the world dripping back into color. Isaiah was mending the fence when he saw a man walking out of the trees, thin, tired, his coat torn, and a sack slung over one shoulder. Caleb Hart. Midnight stirred in the stable. Isaiah set his hammer down, waiting. Lily stepped onto the porch, baby in her arms, silent as the morning. Caleb stopped a few paces away, eyes lowered. "Didn't reckon you'd want to see me," he said. Isaiah's voice was quiet. "Didn't reckon you'd come." Caleb lifted the sack. "Pick these up along the road. Stones. One for every wrong. Figured I'd lay 'em down here." Lily's tone was steady. "Then start." He knelt and opened the bag. One by one he placed the stones along the porch, smooth, gray, still wet from snow. The sound of them tapping against the wood was small but heavy, like rain on a coffin lid. When he finished, he stayed on his knees. "Ain't asking forgiveness," he murmured. "Just need to stop carrying it." Isaiah watched him for a long time. "Then you've done enough," he said. Lily shifted the baby, her eyes soft. "Take what's left," she told Caleb. "Build something. That doesn't break." Caleb nodded, swallowed hard, and rose. He looked once at the child, then turned back down the path. The sound of his boots faded with the melting snow. Isaiah stood watching the line of stones glint under sunlight. Small, imperfect, but honest. Lily stepped beside him, her hand brushing his. "He left a mark that won't hurt anymore," she said. "Maybe that's what forgiveness is," Isaiah replied. Inside, the baby began to cry, her voice high and strong. Lily rocked her gently, humming the old tune that once filled their nights with fear. Now it was different. Light, human, whole. Isaiah joined her, the roughness in his voice smoothing into warmth. May entered from the yard, wiping her hands. "Snow's near gone," she said. "Time to plant something new." Isaiah smiled faintly. "Maybe we already did." They sat together as the evening turned gold. Outside, the last patches of snow shrank into soil. The porch stones gleamed like tiny suns. Lily placed the baby in the cradle. Isaiah knelt beside it, tracing the word he had carved. Home. He leaned close, whispering, "Sleep easy, little fire. We'll keep you lit." The house breathed around them, wood creaking, wind soft through the eaves. Isaiah's voice rose again, singing the lullaby that had once fought the dark. Lily listened, eyes closed, her hand finding his. Outside the window, a single flake of snow drifted down, touched the glass, and melted instantly. The season turned, leaving only warmth behind. In the end, this story isn't just about a lonely rancher and a lost young woman. It's about the quiet power of kindness, the courage to forgive, and the warmth that can still grow even after long winters of sorrow. Isaiah and Lily found not only a home, but a reason to keep the fire burning. A reminder that love doesn't fade with years. It only softens and deepens, like wood smoke in the evening air. If this tale touched something gentle in your heart, if it reminded you of an old love, a lost place, or simply the strength of holding on, we'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your stories keep the spirit of the West alive far beyond the screen. Please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and ring the little bell, so you'll never miss another story of quiet hearts, open skies, and second chances. Thank you for spending this time with us beneath the wide western sky. Until next time, may your fire burn steady, your roads stay kind, and may you always find your way home.